Hello and welcome back to Game Brigade. If you're new here, my name is Brian. Thank you for joining me. Today, we're going to be diving into Euthia, Torment of Resurrection. This is from the Steamforged games, originally from Dia. I think it's Dia Games. But today we have the Steamforged games, and they sent me a copy for review. So we're going to be giving you my opinion and impressions of this game. But funny enough, I had a friend who, when he found out that I was going to be covering this game, he backed the all-in. So he actually brought his copy over, and we've been diving into his copy so I can get a little taste of some of the other content and see what else is available in here. Now, we're going to be talking mostly about my impressions of this game and give you like some of the points of things I liked or didn't like, so that if you are considering backing this game through the new expansion, the Kickstarter expansion, you can have the best information going forward. So if that sounds like something that could be helpful for you, please stay tuned for that. Let's go. Okay, so before I get too far, remember, if you're new here, please remember to hit that subscribe button and hit the like button. And we are going to be talking about Euthia. So Euthia is, the best way I could describe this game, is an open world exploration RPG light game. RPG light is kind of, I don't know how I would describe RPG light. There are elements of an RPG game here, which we'll talk about them with the progression and the exploration. Obviously, there's no real narrative story that's compelling or role-playing elements, obviously. So that's why I was kind of figuring out, it's like an RPG light, but it's got RPG elements to this game. Euthia will take place over this hex-based grid, which will build out as you explore the worlds using these randomized and shuffled hex, whatever these tri-hex discs here. And you'll basically, when you move to a new area, you'll draw one and assign it to the area, revealing more territory, more land for you to explore. The start of the game, where you'll start here at the church, will be surrounded by level 1 territories, but as you progress further and explore more, they will go down from 2 to 3 to 4 to 5, and potentially more depending on the expansions that you get. Each of these tiles has different types of locations that you can visit, giving you a real sense of exploration and world navigating as you see what else is going to be available just further down the road. So we have different types of places you can visit. You've got towns that are overrun by a monster. You've got mountains and places for you to mine. You have other natural resources like the lake that you can mine, but this also has a monster. You have alchemist huts that you can go and visit as long as you defeat the monsters. There are a lot of different things you're going to do, allowing you to kind of navigate the map, go to where you want to go to fulfill the goals that you have. Now, this is a scenario-based game as well, which means there's no narrative campaign for you to follow, but more of scenarios that will have a minor story for you to kind of envelop yourself in. Which will have a set time limit. You usually have so many rounds, say 9, 10, 15 rounds, depending on the length of the scenario, and it'll tell you what your end goals will be. So as you're exploring the territories, as you're moving around, you're going to have that idea of what you're going to need to accomplish as you progress through the land. Now, with that, there is your character down here. You have your character board. I am kind of this like frost mage that I was playing as, kind of a dark frost mage. And you're gonna have different ways that you're going to progress your character through different types of leveling up systems or getting different types of gear. Now, I've kind of just put some things on here to give you an example, but here we have my starting items, which includes any weapons or defensive items I may have, or different types of active abilities that I can trigger and activate for some sort of positive gains. Now here we have your equipment slots. You have your helmets, your chest pieces, your knee pads, your gauntlets, your armor for your feet, a whole bunch of different items that you eventually can loot from exploring different types of ruins to purchasing them at different types of shops. Now these all cost money for you to gain, and it's also one of the only ways for you to eventually progress through the game. So for your character, for example, I start at 5 health. It's a very minimal life. So the only way my character can get more health and more hit points is by purchasing different types of gear. So for example, this chest plate would give me 5 additional gear, or 5 additional health, which is great. And my knee pads give me 3 additional health. So I'll be having 13 health with these 2 items. Now, unfortunately though, I won't be able to carry this piece of gear with me because these remove my bags. So I will not have any storage capacity, even though I got a whole bunch of health. I'm sacrificing that for the ability to have this armor. And so I don't have any more bags, obviously. Now, this is a progression-based game, so as you progress through the game and you earn different types of rewards, you will eventually get to different types of level tiers. And there's a whole stack of tiles here that you're eventually going to be able to get access to for additional levels up. One of the things I like about this is that you have the ability to kind of choose the direction. You choose one, sacrificing not being able to get the other, but eventually being able to get more abilities to strengthen your character and giving you ways to kind of experiment with different types of builds. We'll go more in depth with the character progression later. Right now, I'm just giving you kind of a rough idea of how the game works. Then you will eventually be fighting in combat, which are indicated by these kind of wolf logos. And depending on the amount of swords that you're seeing or the color icon on it will dictate what kind of monster you're going to be fighting, which will be found here in this deck of cards. You will draw the top monster and reveal it, and you'll be fighting out. Now, this is also a multiplayer game or a solo game, depending on how you want to play it. And if it's a multiplayer game, it is a competitive experience. You are playing to be the winner by securing the most victory points by the end of the scenario. Now, there are some scenarios that are competitive cooperative, where you can either all lose together or one person wins together. So, for example, you might have a scenario where at the end of a certain amount of rounds, you have to fight the final monster. If you all defeat the final monster, whoever had the highest victory points will then be the winner of that scenario. But if you guys are not able to collectively defeat that final monster, then you all will lose. So there is that. Now, I've mentioned that competitive aspect though, because if you are playing in a multiplayer section, so two or more players, whoever is controlling the other players will be controlling the monsters that you're going to be facing, and they are going to have an incentive to defeat you, because by killing you, you're going to be losing victory points and they're going to be gaining victory points. So there's an incentive to defeat your opponents in the combat mechanics. And we'll dive through that a little later when I go through the things I like and dislike about this game. But with that, we don't want this game, I don't want this video to be too rambly. There's a whole bunch of things I could sit here explaining about the game, talking about the different elements. But what I really want to get to is talking about some of the elements, the kind of the key mechanisms or mechanics of this game that I think are going to either make it or break it for you. So let's talk about those now, with the first one being character progression. Character progression in this game is very important because you are going to be playing your character and you're going to be experiencing the leveling up and the different types of abilities and powers you're going to unlock as your character progresses through the levels. There are a variety of different characters that you can select, and I will say there is a very good asymmetrical sense with every character. Every character truly feels unique, and as you get through the levels and get to those higher spaces, they really start to feel really completely different than anyone else. So I really appreciate that. It gives a lot of replayability with the sense and that character progression. The one thing though that I really found at times limiting my enjoyment of the game is that this is a scenario-based game. It's not a campaign where you're going to continue your progression to the next scenario and keep going and eventually leveling up as you work your way to level 40 in this case. Because you're going to be doing a new scenario, you're going to constantly be starting at level 1, which means you're going to be spending most of your time in this game at the lower levels as you move through and eventually re-level up and progress. But again, you're spending most of your times between level 1 and 7, 8-ish before you start really progressing up there and getting up into the higher tiers and eventually to the ending of the scenario. Now, there are some changes in some of the expansion content that allows you to play start at a higher tier level, which gives you more access to kind of unlocking your equipment. But I find that those are kind of those niche-y ones, and for the most part, most of the scenarios have you starting level 1, and you have to progress every time. So there is a great sense of asymmetrical enjoyment with the characters, but there is a little bit of repetitiveness and locking at those lower levels for more time than I personally like to see. The other thing I like to talk about is the upgrade paths were really enjoyable. You know, looking at each tier and being like, okay, which one do I want to go with now? I'm going to go with this one, and locking off that other path, and then going to the next tier, choosing this one, locking off that path. It was pretty fun. I enjoyed that aspect. I would have liked to have seen more options at each level, because what I ended up doing, unfortunately, was having a certain path that I liked my character to go, and usually just ignoring the other options because I felt comfortable with those. Now, that's a personal thing. Doesn't mean that you are going to have to do that or that is the best way to do. I just found that I felt more comfortable with certain types of upgrades, and it kind of limited the whole experience of leveling up as it is. But the player progression doesn't just relate to your power level here with your abilities. You also have your item abilities and things you're going to be getting. And the power creep, the sense of power creep and progression is truly there. It actually, you can feel like your character is becoming stronger and better and getting a little bit more synergy with their abilities. And I enjoyed that aspect of the game. I also like that the market is completely random almost in terms of what cards you're going to get. In fact, you'll have a whole bunch of different tiles. You're going to shuffle these tiles before each scenario, and you're going to put them out there 4 at a time for each of the 4 markets. And one of the actions is actually, you can, when you shop at a market, you can wipe an entire section and get 4 more if there's nothing here that you enjoy. So you're going to be able to get a whole bunch of different types of equipment to play with, a bunch of different types of items to have fun with, and there's different types of item sets that you can eventually get to, which then can progress to having stronger or different types of abilities throughout the game, which is cool. You know, being able to get a gear sets effectively, where these are all part of a gear set. In fact, these are all part of the blue gear. These ones are part of the purple gear. So it's kind of cool to see these gear sets coming around. That's something I haven't really seen too much of in a lot of these board games that are high fantasy, is seeing gear sets, which is very common in a lot of online role-playing games or online RPG, games like World of Warcraft or something, which has gear sets for you to build with. So I really liked the progression feeling in this game. You start off at level 1, you're barely scrounging by as you're fighting some of these basic monsters. Like we had the grizzly bear, which is pretty strong. You've got a gecko. That's another gecko, a dragonfly. Like these monsters you don't think are scary, but as a level 1 to level 5 character, they are deadly. Especially when I'm starting off the game at 5 health, and the grizzly bear can potentially do 3 damage, putting me to 2 health in 1 attack. If I don't kill him in the first go, I might be dead immediately. Now, death isn't the end of the game, obviously. If you were to die, you just respawn back in the church, but it does slow your progression. It hurts your overall goal in terms of getting stronger, getting gear, because by killing the monsters, you get rewards. And so you definitely don't want to die, but it's not the end of the world if you do die. So talking about that, let's go to the next section, which is the open world. So a person who is going to be purchasing this game, I think you're going to want to be a person who's not enamored by, say, the dungeon crawl, but more of like the Diablo 3 navigation or the Heroes of Might and Magic like experience, where you're progressing over a large campaign map and kind of getting a high-end view of the landscape and the adventures you have in each of those tile spaces. At least that's what I got. There are a lot of different types of locations that you can discover. Now, they are randomized through the shuffling of the tiles, and each scenario will tell you how many different tiles of each type of set to include in your tile stack, so that you're going to be somewhat consistent in what kind of tiles you're going to see, but the way that those are presented or the way those come out can be kind of different at times. Let me move those rule books out of the way. So for example, if I'm looking for a specific building and I keep moving up this path and I'm not getting it, and all of a sudden if I'm playing a multiplayer game and it happens to come over here for some reason because my partner came over here, that could be unfortunate. And that's just random draws of the tiles as you progress through the game. The other thing to talk about with this world and this movement, oh my gosh, look at that. One hit on a tile and everything just collapses. The other thing to understand if you're going to be looking at this game is a table hog. This thing has so much sprawling capacity because of players moving around and the way the map kind of generates and builds as they go. You're going to need a lot of table space to enjoy this game fully, or do what we had to do and say, this is the wall. There's an artificial wall here, so you're going to have to go this way or this way because you can't come this way anymore. And we had to do that several times because if we had people on this side and people on this side, instead we're going to have a longer table. But then you're going to have also all these different types of boxes everywhere. So there's a lot of sprawling in this game, a lot of components, and a lot of tokens to manage as well. The other thing to talk about with the open world and the movement of this game is the action economy. I didn't talk about how the actions work, but this game has a very, I don't want to say punishing. I felt it was punishing, but it wasn't everyone in the group we played with felt it was that way. But the way this game works is at the bottom of your player board, you have 3 actions, and they are divided into either movement or one of the 3 other key components. So you have either mining, trading, so trading at a border, bartering, or combat. If you want to do several things in a turn, it's going to be very limiting to that. And in fact, you have to almost take a rest turn to generate an additional action for your next turn to be able to get things done in a more efficient manner. What do I mean by that? So the way the game works is, let's say I am here and I want to fight a monster that's located somewhere around me. So I have to spend an action to move. I have either a 1 movement, a 2 movement, or a 3 movement. But since I want to do combat, I cannot use my 3 movement because I need to use that one as combat. So I have to either use my 1 or my 2. But if I also want to mine something, that means I cannot use my 1 because that one needs to mine, so I need to use my 2. But let's say I want to fight at one of these locations as a bartering section, I can't use my 2. So this situation is actually pretty lucky. I can move for 1, move here, fight the monster. If I defeat it, I can then barter with it, which then you will see a bunch of these tokens eventually filling the board as you either mine locations. Well, that's not where I want to put that. Either mine different types of locations, or you eventually barter with different types of people. And as that happens, as you start placing your tokens going around the board for doing your actions, these will also link up to victory points at the end of the game. You'll be able to, because once a location's mined, your opponents cannot mine that location, so you're basically locking that off for them. And then at the end of the game, you will count up all those points by, these are all worth something at the end of the game. So everything you do in this open world will relate to some sort of victory point at the end of the game, because everything you do will matter in this game. But talking about the action point system, going back to that, I felt at times, there was things where like, well, I need to shop because I'm really low on health and I have a lot of gold, but I can't use my barter because it's too far away, or there's a monster on it, so I need to fight it. So there's a lot of times where you're like, well, I need to move here and we're just gonna hang out for a second. I'm gonna skip past my turn. So next turn, I can do what I truly wanna do. I didn't like that experience. To me, that was kind of limiting. It felt kind of like an unfun time. But my friend that I played with, Sean, who obviously bought the all-in, he loved that experience. He didn't think it was distracting at all, and he thought it was a really kind of tactical way to play the game. So I want to make sure I put that opinion out there so you can make the assessment of what you think about this limiting 3 action system and see if that one would play well for you or feel too limiting for you. And obviously you're going to have to be the one that makes that decision for yourself. I can only say what I liked or didn't like for me. The other thing to talk about in terms of just the overall scale of the game here at the end of this section is to truly get the best experience out of Euthia. I feel like you have to play the longer scenarios, the bigger scenarios, which have more tiles, more things to do. So it just makes more stuff on the board, more things to play out. But it also coincides with the fact that you're actually going to be able to experience the magic that Euthia can provide. There is a magic in Euthia, and it is with that level progression, getting your character to higher tiers, experimenting with some of the different types of builds that you can do, but you're sacrificing that with only really seeing that experience in the higher tiers. And I'll finalize that a little bit more at the end, because that was kind of like one of my final thought moments. Before I dive into final thoughts, let's finish this with the combat mechanics, because that's the final thing you'll be doing quite a bit of, so you can make sure this is for you. So as I mentioned, combat is the other cornerstone of this game. You've got the character progression, you've got the open world movement, and then you've got the combat. Depending on how you play this, either solo or in multiplayer, combat can be different. And I think the way the combat feels is vastly different between the two. In a multiplayer game, combat is a dueling minigame where the other players truly do want to play their best to kill you, because it's going to give the best progression for them in terms of victory points, as well as pulling you further behind in your points. So the way that works is players are going to be getting these silver cards either through rewards that are on the map, or by the monster. When you draw it, he will have, of course, these ones don't. Let me see if I can find one that does. I think the dragonfly does. Yeah. Sometimes they'll have a fist up there for you to draw a card into your hand, which that is for your opponents. Your opponents are then going to have these cards that they're going to play, utilizing the skills that the monster that you're fighting against can do. For example, this dragonfly would draw a silver card into their hand of cards that they already have, so they can have multiple of these cards from other encounters, or by abilities, like my character here has the ability to just draw a silver card into my hand. And then they have these chaos tokens as well as guard tokens to re-roll their dice to make them stronger, or to play one of these cards from their hand, making things harder or whatever. So how does that work? Well, there's a few things that they can do. For example, they could do mind control, which, by playing a card out using your chaos token here, it gives them a +5 to whatever their roll is. And then down here at the bottom, you see that there is numbers. So if I roll between 4 and 7, I do 1 damage. 8 and 11, I do 2 damage. 12 plus, I do 3 damage. And you basically just do that by rolling your dice. So for here, I rolled 11. And because I rolled +5, you do 11 plus 5 to 16. And now that is my roll. So technically I would do 3 here. My opponent can utilize their guard tokens and say, no, you're going to re-roll that 6 to a 4. And then the guard token I use is going to give a -2. So now you've rolled a 7, which puts you down in the 2 damage slot. So that's kind of the idea. This is a dueling game where the person who's the character is going to be trying to affect their dice, and then the person who's playing the monster is going to try to use their cards and their own tokens to affect you back to try to deal as much damage as you can, eventually whittling your life down to hopefully kill you. So I will say during the combat for me, it was definitely fun, because it was fun trying to kill your friends or deal damage to them. But when you do die, it's definitely an unfun experience. I remember I killed the first game we played. I killed Sean first, and I was living high. I was like, oh, dude, this is so fun. But when you die, not only do you come back with some more stuff, you draw a gold card, so that when your opponent gets into another combat, now you have an even stronger card to kind of bring back retribution and deal damage to them, which he did. He played everything out that he had saving up to kill me that round. And then I went all sour and I was like, that's not fun. This is unfun. So it's definitely an interesting experience, but it does play into the sense that it gives players a sense of that they are doing something to kind of hinder their opponent, and playing more into that competitive nature. Now, there are scenarios in the multiplayer setting that will have you also using the solo variant combat system, which is interesting. And I like that because it let us kind of see how the solo element plays with this game. And the solo combat rules are pretty good, and I like the way they flowed, but definitely removes that competitiveness, obviously, that the multiplayer brings. And then the last thing to talk about combat is you have the She's Intervention dice. When your opponent does really well, these go up, or when you do really badly, this goes up. And these are kind of like get out of jail free cards. You can spend these dice to redeem them for some type of reward to make the combat swing in your favor, either the next time you fight or in that same combat. So kind of an interesting little dice token thing there. So with that, let's kind of talk about my final thoughts and recommendations for this game. Euthia was an enjoyable, open world kind of adventure game that was nice in the sense that there are scenarios. So there wasn't a huge commitment to the sense of, I need to keep playing this game every week. There was like, oh yeah, we can play it. And, we left it in the well down here. We played it when we could to get some enjoyment from it. I enjoy scenario-based games. But alternatively, I wish that there was some progression differences that I could have seen, or maybe it was hard to say because you want your cake and eat it too almost. Like I want to enjoy the character progression elements because that's kind of the best part of the game, but you don't get to experience the top tier magic that Euthia offers, which is at those tier levels between 18 and 40, where you get to really see some of the uniqueness of each character shine through and the different types of power levels and specialties that they each provide. Now, you could just play the scenarios that have a higher middling start point area for it, but I think that kind of detracts from the core experience, which is starting from the beginning and going from there. So there's a food for thought there, and depending on what you like or dislike in that. The other things I enjoyed was the rule book was really solid. In fact, they have a whole bunch of different types of rule books here. You have the scenario book, which has the 11 different scenarios for you to play with, which are great. You have the rule book, which was a really good read. I enjoyed the rule book. Has an adjoining appendix. And one of the best things about this appendix that I really liked was that each character has their own page for you to go through. So depending on the character you're playing, if you have any questions on what a tile means or what something you're trying to understand means, you can go to that tile and read it. And in fact, almost everything you need or have a question on will be found in appendix, and that's always very helpful. The rule book was an easy read, and if we had any specific questions on something in the game, it was easy to find it through the back here. They have an index, so you can just look for the thing you're trying to reference to, and then go to the section you're having a question on, and it would pretty much answer your questions every time. So I enjoyed the setup for that aspect. The major decline I have for this game, if I were to give you my major disappointments, is that it's just a lot of stuff going on. Unboxing this game, punching this game is not a fun experience. There are so many different types of tokens, different types of tiles. Here you have, and this isn't even everything that we have. We have so many different types of tiles, more stuff here, more stuff here, you have more stuff here. You got the shop, we got these ones over here, we've got decks of cards over here, you got these over here, you got more over here, and these are all filled with tiles. You got more over here. I have a bunch of stuff over there. We got more decks of cards over here. It's a lot of stuff, guys. And the setup and teardown is definitely daunting. It's an experience, and I think you have to really get a system down in terms of the organization you have so that the things that you play with regularly are handily available, and the things you don't touch very often are kind of tucked away or stored in the box for long-time storage until you need it. Because our storage solution was not the best, and it definitely detracted from the game time or searching for certain types of cards or finding something that we needed was just a real annoyance. So it's kind of, the joy of the game can come from the amount of stuff you have, because it is an expansive RPG-ish game, but it's also just a bear to deal with. There's a lot of stuff to go with overall. And then in terms of who would I recommend this for? Euthia as a game is a good experience, and I don't know if I would recommend this for anyone higher than 2-player count. I think this game is a great solo game. I'm not a solo gamer, But after playing the scenario that had the solo rules implemented into it, and then knowing how much longer adding an additional player is and kind of the experience you're getting from it, I think Euthia shines as a solo game. So if you're a solo gamer, this is a top tier experience for this kind of setup. For 2 players, I think that is the maximum I would want to do. It gives a good sense of the exploration. You have that dueling mechanic, but when you start adding a 3rd player, or God forbid a 4th player, the downtime and the length of the scenarios exasperates and gets very long. In fact, one of the final scenarios, if I remember right, is like close to 2 hours per player. So up to 20 game minutes here. Let's see here. 120 minutes per player. So if you're playing that with 4 players, it's going to be an all-day experience with this one. And I don't know if there's enough reward for the time in something like that. So I would lean more heavily to keeping this recommendation at solo or 2 players. But if you're looking for a game that kind of provides you that exploration, RPG, progression system, Euthia has it in folds. You have a lot of game here. There's a lot of content you can dive through. And in fact, this game could be your lifestyle game for 2 or 3 years worth of content as you progress and play things. You even have the ability to replay scenarios. Because of the randomized drawing of the setups, every game is going to be different types of experiences for you to play through, and different types of challenges as you move through the environment. So overall, I really enjoyed this game. It's hard for me to stamp this with a score because there's so much content that is available for Euthia, and I haven't been able to dive through all of it. And so for me, I have a hard time scoring a game in that manner. But as a recommendation, I feel like I've been fairly clear in who I'd recommend this for or would not recommend this for based on the key mechanics of the game that I've outlined here. Hopefully that helps you guys make a decision for yourself if this game is one that you're going to want to pick up in the future. Leave a comment down below if you are picking it up or if you're interested in picking up. I'd love to know. Otherwise, thank you for watching. Remember to subscribe if you're new to the channel and you want to support us and grow. And I will talk to you very soon. Bye-bye.